Good day, ladies and gentlemen. For today's topics, we will be having ratio and proportion, direct, indirect, and partitive proportion. So let's start first by identifying the meaning of each term. So let's start first with ratio. Ratio is a way of comparing two or more quantities. And for proportion is a statement of equality between two ratio or fractions. And for direct proportion, as one quantity increases or decreases, the other quantity increases or decreases at the same rate and vice versa. And for inverse proportion is when one quantity increases as the other quantity decreases at the same rate and vice versa. And for partitive proportion is a whole divided into parts that is proportional to the given. So shall we start giving examples? Let's go. So let's start first with ratio. Example, if we have 6 mangoes and 3 apples, what is the ratio of apples to mangoes? So let's first write it into a word form, 3 is to 6. And for the colon form, instead of writing is to, we are going to replace it by the colon symbol, which will give us 3 colon 6. And for the fraction form, we can write it is 3 over 6. We can only use the fraction form if we're comparing only two quantities. But will that be our final answers? No. Why? Because 3 colon 6 and 3 over 6 can be simplified. They are both divisible by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1 and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that will give us 1 colon 2, and for the fractional form it will give us 1 over 2, which is 1 half. So now let's proceed to proportion. So let's start with our first example. 1 is to 3 is equivalent to 3 is to 9. I want you to know that there are two parts in proportion. The numbers we find inside are called the means, and the numbers that we find outside are called the extremes. We will know if the ratios are proportional to each other if the product of the means and extremes are equal. So let's start first by multiplying the means. 3 times 3 will give us 9. And for the extremes, 1 times 9 will give us 9. Since the product of the two proportions is 9 and it's equal, that means it's correct and it is proportion. And now let's try on another example. 1 is to 2 is equivalent to 3 is to 4. So let's start by multiplying the means first. 2 times 3 is 6. And 1 times 4 is 4. Are they equal? No. So this means this is not proportion. So as you can see down there, I tried to write them in a fractional form. So 1 half is equivalent to 3 over 6. So what we have to do here is cross multiply. So 1 times 6 will give us 6 and 2 times 3 will give us 6. That means it is proportion. And for the other example, 1 half is equivalent to 3 over 4. So let's try cross multiplying them. 1 times 4 is 4 and 2 times 3 is 6. So that means the answer is not proportion. Now let's have a word problem. Example, let's say we have 2 cups of flour and 1 cake, which will give us 2 is to 1. Now how many cups of flour does the baker need to make 3 cakes? So let's first write down the number of cups of flour, which is 2, over the number of cakes, which is 1. Since we have 3 cakes, how many cups of flour does the baker need? Since we don't know the answer yet, we can just put n. And now we can start cross multiplying. So 2 times 3 is 6 and 1 times n is 1n. And then we have to divide 6 by 1. So 6 divided by 1 will give us 6. So that will be our answer. So now 2 times 3 is 6 and 1 times 6 is 6. So that means the answer is proportion and it's correct. And now for direct proportion. Example, if 2 buses can transport 40 people, how many buses are needed to transport 80 people? So let's first write down the number of buses, which is 2, and the number of people, which is 40. And now we can proceed to cross multiply. So 2 times 80 is 160 and 40 times n is 40n. We can divide 160 to 40 and that will give us 4, which will be the answer. So 2 times 80 is 160 and 40 times 4 is 160. That means the answer is correct. So now let's proceed to inverse proportion. Example, if 12 men can finish a work in 9 days, How many men can finish the same work in 6 days? So let's start first by listing down the number of men we have. So we have 12 men, and now let's start also by listing down the number of days we have. So 9 days. So the question is, we want to know how many men can finish the work in only 6 days. Since we don't know the answer yet, we can just place n as the numerator. And then now, since it's an inverse proportion, we have to set up a proportion as indirect by interchanging the position of n horizontally, which will give us n over 9 is equivalent to 12 over 6. And now we can start by cross multiplying. So 9 times 12 will give us 108, and n times 6 will give us 6n. So let's divide 108 by 6, which will give us 18, which will be the correct answer. So our final answer will be 18 over 9 is equivalent to 12 over 6, because 9 times 12 will give us 108, and 18 times 6 will give us 108, which means it's correct in proportion. And for our last and final topic, we have the partitive proportion. So let's proceed to our example. Of the total students in a certain town, the ratio of elementary students, high school students, and college students is 4:3:1. If there is a total of 540 students, how many are elementary students, high school students, and college students? 4:3:1 is equivalent to 4 plus 3 plus 1, which will give us 8. So our first step is find the sum of the ratio, which is 8. And the second step is to divide the base by the sum, which will be 540 students divided by 8 equals to 67.5. And for the third step, we have to multiply each quantity by the quotient. So 4 times 67.5 will give us 270 for the elementary students. And 3 times 67.5 will give us 202.5 for high school students. And finally, 1 times 67.5 will give us 67.5 for college students. So if you sum all of this up, this will give us 540 students. 270 plus 202.5 plus 67.5 will give us 540 students. I hope you liked the video and found it interesting. Please leave a subscribe button, and thank you for watching.